What stood out to you from today's face-off between Todd Blanche, Trump's defense, and Michael Cohen?
Well, as Laura said in your lead up, Michael Cohen is a necessary witness here. He is the only witness thus far who's able to tell us about direct conversations with Donald Trump, where Donald Trump was not only aware of the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels, but he approved it. And he reimbursed Michael Cohen and knew that what he was reimbursing him for. And so those conversations are really important. And one of the things Todd Blanche did successfully today is cast doubt on at least one of those conversations. Really, it wasn't clear to me that this was a misstep from Cohen or that Cohen is even lying about this. It was just, I think, a misstep from the prosecution, maybe, to not show him these messages to kind of orient him to a specific date and time that happened in 2016. I mean, how many people could go through their call logs and know exactly a precise date and time of when a call happened? That's really hard to do. And so I was surprised he didn't maybe testify a little more broadly about the date and time. You know, generally it was in this October timeframe, because once you pin it down like that, it's really hard if they have other messages that suggest it may have been about something else. You would expect them to kind of have looked at that and made sure if they were going to pin it down that they knew exactly what they were talking about and had the full context for it. So it was a misstep, but I will say, you know, this was not a Chris Kreider hat trick to clinch the game. The game is still very much in play. I expect that the prosecutors will come back on Monday and, you know, in redirect, they will clean some of this up.
Okay, well, even if the context of a conversation is off, Tim, they've got the documentation, right? They've got the checks.
And they've got ample corroboration from other witnesses, Hope Hicks, David Pecker, et cetera, et cetera. And I would preface all this saying no one can predict what the jury's going to do. And we can't get it. Yeah, and you know, we can't get inside the jurors' minds. But sitting there today, I think what they say, I mean, I think Todd Blanche is not a great defense attorney. He came into the Trump world through Boris Epstein, who came into the Trump world through Eric Trump. And you have this series, I think, of C-minus players who get Donald Trump's ears, and he gives them a lot of responsibility that maybe they would not otherwise earn. And I think there were other people sitting at his defense table, at Trump's defense table, who are much more capable than Todd Blanche. And I think he had a horrible first day of cross. I think he recovered today. But what he went through today was an assault on Michael Cohen's credibility. And I think he established that Michael Cohen is a serial liar, just like Donald Trump is.
Okay, but that's the thing. Michael Cohen, yes, was a liar for 10 years at the direction, at the behest of Donald Trump. Like,
yes.
If they wrote a job description, be my thug, my hush money, my liar, my fixer. That was the job.
Lie to the media for me. If there's a bad story in the works, please lie to them and put the story on a different track. If I've got business people or business competitors who are in my way, help me undermine them. If I'm in a political foot race and women are coming out saying that I slept with them, please put that story in a different place. So that was his job, and I don't think I do think he's an important witness. I think the prosecution has done a very good job of establishing a fact pattern here that transcends Michael Cohen, and I don't think the jury has to rely entirely on Michael Cohen any longer to believe that a crime was committed here. You have Alan Weisselberg signing invoices with all of the information in his own handwriting, outlining exactly the fraud that took place. And Alan Weisselberg is not somebody who is ever going to turn on Donald Trump. He was doing what he was told every day of his life by Donald Trump. So I think that Todd Blanche didn't tell a narrative to the jurors. He was not thematically coherent in a way that a good, I think, defense attorney or prosecutor is capable of doing, standing up in front and just thematically walking them through a story that makes sense to them and undermines, in this instance, the prosecution's case.
John, Michael Cohen's credibility issues are all well established, as are Donald Trump's. You have covered Trump world for years now. How do you view what we all just saw in court?
Yeah, it's a great question, Stephanie. I mean, this is the pitfall of resting a lot of your case or having your star witness be Michael Cohen, who is perhaps best known at this point for the lies he told. And as you point out, many of them on behalf of Donald Trump. But the problem for the jury, and of course, we don't know what they're going to do, how they're going to assess this information. And as Tim noted, there's a whole lot of other information that the jury's been given, corroborating material and evidence from David Pecker and others, as well as the documentation. But this is the pitfall of Michael Cohen. This was a good day for the defense and it was a bad day for the prosecution. And I think that's the first time that you could say that in 18 days of this trial. Now, the jury's going to have a lot to assess. The prosecutor's going to have a chance to redirect with Michael Cohen. But, Todd Blanche slipped one past the goalie, if we're going to continue with the hockey metaphor. And the question is, are the prosecutors going to be able to score a few more?
I want to go back to then what the last point you were making, Christy. Monday, redirect time. Is this where the prosecution cleans up that sloppiness from today? What do you expect from them?
I do. I think they really need to go back through that day in particular, that October 24th day where that phone call happens, look at all of the messages with Keith Schiller, but also look at any other messages that day and see if there is any greater context that they can, put forth to really maybe, put some other evidence there before Michael Cohen and see if he can explain it. I mean, what he said on the record was, this is my belief about what happened. And I think Todd Blanche rightly said, well, the jury doesn't want to know what you think happens. They want to know your personal life, what happened. And that's where you really get into danger trying to pinpoint things from, a decade ago with call logs. It's a dangerous thing to do, but I think they just need to go back through the evidence and see what they have. The other thing that I thought was just really damaging, and I'm not sure how you really recover from this on redirect, is he said sitting here today that, in testimony, that he still believes that it was a corrupt prosecution that was brought against him federally, not having anything to do necessarily with the campaign finance violations, but with conduct that was separate apart from Donald Trump, namely the tax fraud. And he said, look, the prosecutors shouldn't have come for me. He said he pled guilty to it in 2018. Then a few months ago in the civil fraud trial, he said he didn't do it. He never evaded his taxes completely. And then he said he lied during the guilty plea. Now today it's, I never disputed the facts, which again, he clearly did under oath. But they just shouldn't have come after me. It was a $4 million tax fraud over 5 years. Why shouldn't they have prosecuted that case? I was in that office. I supervised and prosecuted cases that were in that kind of realm of that duration with that kind of money. Those are serious criminal cases. So, calling the judge corrupt, which he did on the stand sitting here today, not, oh, I shouldn't have said that. It was the federal judge was in on it, and I believe he's corrupt. And he also said that, he was confronted with his statements about the prosecutors and the judge being effing animals. And there was no contrition for that. There was no, I shouldn't have blamed them. It was blame the bank, blame the accountant, blame the prosecutor, blame the judge, and blame Donald Trump. And when you set it out that way, as the defense did today, that is pretty damning because it makes it seem like he's got a problem with everybody and will never take the blame himself. And I'm actually not really sure how you recover from that on redirect, because this is a man who just seems to be unable to accept responsibility for his own criminal conduct, the one that does not involve Donald Trump. That is a problematic thing to ask a jury to believe somebody who just, again, can't really seem to get his story straight.